very much, Leader Che, and it's a privilege and honor for me to be part of today's celebration of a great day. We are very honored to have in our midst the Okute of Nigeria, His Excellency Peter Obi, and the many other very distinguished ladies and gentlemen who have joined the platform. We're indeed grateful to all of you, and we hope that in spite of all things, we'll have a very rewarding engagement and conversation this afternoon. Today is a very symbolic day for many reasons. It's symbolic in the sense that this is 30 years. It's symbolic because it comes also at a time when the country has just come through an election that has many of the mannerisms and characteristics and ingredients of the election that happened 30 years ago. Some people have actually shared with us in their own language that this is a question of two elections with two mandates of the people stolen. That the election that saw Abiola not being president was one in which the mandate of the people was lost and stolen. Again, people feel that this mandate again has been taken away from the people, and that the choices that the people made do not quite represent what we ended up having at the end of our elections in February in particular. So there is a lot to do in terms of the commonalities that exist and in terms of the spaces that need to be engaged with. What is important about what we are trying to do, and I'll step back a little bit to give a context to it, is that we are holding to a space which we believe is very fundamental to the revival of our democracy, because the fear that has evaded the entire political firmament is that if the rules that govern democracies are not protected and not held onto, we will have a free fall of democracy. The democracy is going to become the winner takes all. Whoever has the might, whoever is able to exercise that might in whatever form or manner begins to have the say in terms of what happens in the end. And we cannot, in the long term, even in the short term, build a democracy around a system where the rules do not matter. And for us, we think that many things have happened in February 2023, which suggests to us that the rules were grossly undermined, and that we need to go back to raising the bar and raising the standard, and calling on our institutions and calling on the rules that we have established over the years to begin to become applicable to the kinds of democracy that we have. It is in the light of this conversation, and in the light of the fact that many of us were part and parcel of the 1980s and 1990s, where we fought the military, and the pro-democracy movement stood its grounds to tell the military that, look, you cannot determine how to run the country without the inclusion of the people. And we worked for the return of democracy. That those voices that represented that era got up together and said, look, it's time for us to re-energize, to re-return, to remind ourselves as well as remind Nigerians of that history and of that moment. And as a result, we said to ourselves, what is it that we can bring to the table in the face of what has become a very contentious election and a very, situations where people have become extremely disappointed in the outcomes that came out of this. And we agreed that if it's a democracy, it is a democracy. We will respect the rule of law to the point that we recognize that the courts are a conflict resolution mechanism, a mechanism that is going to help us resolve whatever disagreements we have with the politics and the polity and the elections that happened. So the fact that we are a group of people who believe that the rules must count are also the group of people who believe that the courts must be given the space to have their say. As a result of being people who are mindful of the legal context in which we run our democracy, we are also appealing to all our citizens across the country that as much as it is within their rights to come out and demonstrate today and protest today and speak up in support of what's going on or against what's going on and celebrate the fact that democracy is something we want to behold, we are also saying that that must be done in the context of the law. It is not something that we have to do arbitrarily or something we have to do as though we haven't recognized our own personal histories as well as the histories that have brought us together. So this is a space for us to have that conversation about what does it mean to rekindle that sense of this community that we represent. We are saying to the entire country and to the president and to all who care to listen that we fought for this space. We stood up. The pro-democracy movements, the human rights movement, the women's rights movement, the youths and many other movements came together. The ethnic associations and so on came together and worked for this democracy. And they still have a voice and a right, irrespective of whoever is seated in government of the country. And if there are things we feel that are not done in the way which it ought to be done, we do have a right to bring our voices to bear in that space. It is on account of that that we are first and foremost having this dialogue around the issues of that contested election and the way forward. We are aware that the legal process is something we are bound by, but beyond that, we also have to be sensitive to the expectations of Nigerians as we go forward. Then there's the second nauseating, I would call it very nauseating experience for us as we were just trying to contend with the issues of the elections itself and the fallout of that elections and the expectations of the judiciary and the huge national deficit that we have in terms of trust of any of our institutions, as it were, when we got this message, subsidy is gone. I mean, a declaration was made with huge implications for the country, and the declaration was made in a very callous and insensitive manner. We ended up with a 270% increase in the cost of petrol and PMS, and we are now thinking of what do we do by way of cushioning. I was amazed to sit down on television and watch people from organized private sector meeting with Mr. President, saying to him that we will offer the country 100 compressed natural gas buses. And I'm asking myself, is that for Abuja? Is that for Lagos or for Apapa? Is that for Apapa or for mainland? Or where exactly do you start to apply 100 buses? And it begins to make an impact on what has become such an important decision that transcends all levels of society. And like we say about the subsidy, it is something that is in everybody's pocket. It affects every pocket and every family and every household in the country. So how do we begin to do that? And you can see how ill prepared government was. The government at the subnational level, some have declared that you come to work for 3 days. What that means in the long term, nobody knows. Are people going to start working from home? I mean, which means that they need to be provided with some sort of online capabilities to be able to work from home. Or what exactly is that policy about? It is obvious to all of us that this hasn't been thought through and that there isn't a plan on ground. As much as the president will want to celebrate this as a strong decision, this is a strong decision that is headed nowhere. And we are calling on the government to pay attention to the needs of the people. In my own words, I would say government hasn't got a right to be insensitive to the needs of its citizens. The citizens are the responsibilities of government. And that's what our constitution says, that our welfare, our protection, our everything that has to do with us is the business of government. And we must get back to making sure that government is in a position to deal with that. So just to say that these two hydra-headed problems are the problems that have brought us into this conversation this afternoon. And it is our hope that we will have a very strong and rigorous conversation We hope that you understand, like the rest of us too, that this obnoxious decision that happened on the 28th of or 29th of May was actually directed not at the people who have turned subsidy into a commodity of crime, but to the ordinary citizens of the country who have been scapegoated and made to pay for something they had no reason paying for, which is the unfortunate part of all of this. Let me stop at this point in time, but before I do so, we have issued a statement, and I would encourage us to please go back to the statement which was issued on this issue of subsidy. Before then, we had also worked closely with Labour and supported them in the strike actions they had taken. But unfortunately, the negotiations that Labour went into were abrupt. We felt that Labour had not consulted as widely as it should have done. We also felt that the TUC's negotiations with the government in power was only to cover a very limited number of persons, because from all indications, those in the formal organized employment of government are fewer than 10% of the population of Nigeria. And whatever agreements TUC and NLC have reached have no reach for the rest of the country. And that we as concerned civil society citizens need to work up there and hold that space for the over 90% of Nigerians who have nobody speaking up to them. So we had initially supported the strike action, but when the TUC and NLC moved on to call up the strike, we made our own demands independently. We called on this government to explain to us how it arrived at the template, which it has used to come to the price of 530 something naira per liter. We said to them that, look, the conversation is not about the removal of subsidy or not, but the question is about the removal of the fraud in subsidy, and that conversation has not actually happened. We wanted to know, for example, what's going to happen to the 800 million World Bank subsidy loan, which was collected from the World Bank before the end of the last government, and its utilization. We've heard that 50 million households will be identified, how that will be done and in what regard and for how long, we just don't have we don't understand what's going on that front. We also know that the PIA is already in operation, and that although this government wants us to believe that the decisions it has taken so far have been a decision that is independent of the PIA, but we also know that in the context of the PIA, there are certain obligations which government must pay attention to, and we want to know to what extent the decision on subsidy being done is addressing those concerns. We worry that there's a lot of talk about us paying for the PMS at a price of 540.50, whereas the vice president himself had recognized and spoken about a very powerful cartel in the oil and gas sector. And no reference has been made since the declaration as to what will be done about that cartel. That cartel seems to be enjoying a very close relationship with government, and nothing has happened to suggest to us that beyond punishing the ordinary citizens with this new price and this inflicted and callous price on fuel, that something has to also give way on the other side. We've seen through some of the write-ups of SAN Femi Falana that there are many other subsidies that people in privileged positions are enjoying. And we believe that what needs to happen is that the cost of governance as a whole needs to become a matter of negotiation. We shouldn't pay this price for just the sake of paying the price. We must pay the price in the context that we understand that the basis for the negotiations are that the gains that will be made. The vice president talks about savings that will be made. And our question is, what is the savings going to go to? If we pay 550, who is gaining from the savings that he talks about? We fear that what we are going to see is a replacement of a fraud by another fraud. And so we want to be very, very clear here that This process has to be as transparent, open, accessible, and consultative as possible. And we in this space, irrespective of our number, size, and ability, will continue to hold our voices and make a demand on government that whatever is involved in this has to be before. So in effect, what this whole thing boils down to is that we need a whole new economic outlook to the country, an outlook that says we have to move away from spending a lot of our money privileging a few to spending a lot of our money dealing with the problems of the larger numbers of Nigerians. That shift has to happen. It is both a shift that is economic and democratic, because the majority should have the say at the end of the day. So this has been our fulcrum. People have tried to drag us into arguments of templates and everything. We believe that when this discussion gets into the nitty-gritty of it, we will, as a community, draw together our experts and all those who have deeper knowledge of the issues before us to make that conversation. It doesn't end as a conversation between ourselves. It's also a conversation between us and the key players in government to make sure that this time around, there is a genuine commitment to addressing the needs of the ordinary citizens of our country. So we're grateful that all of you have joined us this afternoon, and to say that this represents the beginning of many more actions and conversations, and to demand and to request respectfully to all of you that whenever we call, you would understand the space that we're trying to hold here. The space we're trying to hold is a space that says we are the representatives of that democratic space that we fought for many decades ago, and that we are the voices of those who try to uphold the values that define it. And those values are a rules-based approach to democracy and to governance. Thank you very much for your time and for listening to me. I will now turn around and cede the space back to my colleague, Comrade Chair, for him to carry on with the moderation of the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chair, and thank you to all who have stayed up with us onto this very end. During the course of our conversation, we had well over 70 people join and leave at different times. And so it's been a very engaging interaction. We are excited by it. As you can see, the turn of events have been very, it's almost on a roller skate. We don't have the luxury of time to begin to ask ourselves, are we doing things right or are we doing things wrong? Because things are evolving every day. Before you wake up, government is doing a new thing. Before you wake up, another new thing is on us. Another new thing is on us. Another new thing is on us. But we have decided from what we have seen, with the two themes that we have taken on board. And let me please thank my elder from my church, Dr. Eleazu. Amazing, I haven't seen him in over 20 years. Elder, nice to hear your voice, and thank you very much for your kind words. I totally agree with you, and that was my point, and the point of our group is that we must return to a rules-based democracy. So we are very much in tune with the points that you have made. We have seen the argument on the side of the democratic work which we have to do. That work is we must return to a more predictable democracy, one which the citizens have a voice in, one which the citizens have their mandates respected and not thrown. And that's what June 12 represents. June 12 represents 30 years of demanding that the people's mandate must be respected. And what we intend to do, apart from going through this recorded message of today's meeting, is to also aggregate all the comments, because I know that many Nigerians have spoken today, including the president and many others. We must begin to aggregate those voices and make them the voices that resonated today with the pro-democracy celebrations that we have had. So there is enough information out there beyond even what we have said in this meeting to give us a sense of what Nigerians feel and what Nigerians want. But from us, the takeaway is that we must return to a democracy which respects our voices. and that this space we are articulating from is a space that is ours and we must own, keep, and use it. There are many who think we have not done enough. We need to do a lot more. Some people think that we should be on the streets. Some people think we should do many more other things. Again, we reminded ourselves at the very beginning that a lot of what we are angry about on the one side, which is the outcome of the last elections, are before the courts. We also have to respect the sanctity of the judiciary and see what comes out of that process before we take steps that may be counterproductive in terms of what we hope to gain in the long term. So in the end, on that pillar of today's meeting is to hold this space, make sure this space is respected. And how do we do that? We will aggregate the points that have been made on this platform, as well as the points that have been made broadly by many in Nigeria and across Nigeria, to bring that voice back to the citizens of the country and make them realize that indeed there are people who are saying that what is going on in Nigeria today is totally unacceptable. On the second arm is the question of the subsidy. Everyone who has spoken, Dr. Idikakalu, has given us a menu on which we can now go back and rebuild a very solid statement, which we would make available to the public as the reasons why we are in this debate, and seek a dialogue in our own rights, seek a dialogue in our own rights on how we want the country to proceed with the implications of some of the very callous decisions that have been taken already. So going forward, we have work to do. The first piece of work we have to do is to generate a press release based on this meeting and also based on what we are hearing across Nigeria from different sources, from different people who have spoken today about what the issues are. We need to do an analysis of what people are saying. And then in addition, is to begin to build our base, to broaden the base. I think what is not in doubt from today's meeting is that we do have a leadership in this group that can propel this arguments forward and bring the awareness and consciousness at the highest possible levels of Nigeria and government. Our leader, Peter Obi, was here. Atiku is with us, although he wasn't here in person, and many others indicated interest to be with us. And these are all avenues and channels through which we can take our messages through. And once we get these press releases out, we are going to make sure all of them receive a copy of it and they begin to use it as a tool for making demands on the government and on the different players within the political space. We have to build our own base too. There is a lot of work to be done in building our own base. We need to go back and sit with labor and find out how we can work better with them in terms of the disappointments that have already taken place in the last couple of days when the negotiations and the calling off of the strike action happened. We need to go back and work on all of that. It's not going to be an easy road, like Otumba Shegun has told us. It's going to be a long journey. The important thing about our group is that there are veterans here. These are people who have been at on this path for many decades, 30 years and more. So this is not new to them. If they have spent 30 years and can return 30 years later to celebrate something they did 30 years ago, or to make points around that, I don't think the journey of 4 years is too much for them. We will continue to make this point. We will continue to demand these voices. We will continue to hold on to our space. And God, with being with us, we will definitely have some sort of recognition for all the things that have gone wrong with our country. People are hungry for a different Nigeria, and we represent the voices of those people who want a different Nigeria. Thank you very much. I will leave it there, and I think if Che has anything to add, he can add.
Yes.
Otherwise,